Oh, hello. I am just going to wait for Sarah Thacker to hop on here. There's no one else on the call, but it's recording. So you all who see this recording are just going to see me kind of staring at my screen. Ah, yay, Sarah. Hey, can you hear me? Oh, yeah, I have to allow you to talk. Sarah?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yay, okay.
Hey. All right, so we need to figure out how to get you on video because right now, whenever you talk, it just shows your name.
Okay.
So let's see. I imagine that there is, let me see, hold on one second. Do you see, oh, let's see. Let's see what that does. Oops. Ah, there you go.
Hey.
Yay, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
All right.
I'm excited.
Me too. That's pretty crazy to have 107 people.
112 now. So,
wow.
Yeah. I got some emails beforehand, and it seems as if people were letting me know that they couldn't be on here live, but that's why it's recorded. So,
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll give it about another minute. Are you in your office?
I'm just I'm in my home office.
Oh, nice. Yeah, perfect.
I'm only in the office that I rent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So
Gotcha. Has New York been getting crazy weather like we have?
it's been off and on. We had the residual storms from all that nonsense on Tuesday, so that was a mess that day. But other than that, it has been pretty nice actually. I heard you guys had it really rough. On Monday, I left from teacher training, and then it was like we just had this nice, easy ride home, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, stuff is going crazy."
Yeah, we had I think the number was 8 tornadoes touched down in the area. So I was actually driving to an appointment, and I live by VCU, and so all of the sirens were going off, and I was like, fire, truck. I didn't know, and I was just kind of moving right along, but yeah. So I didn't see anything, but it was just really scary skies.
It was crazy.
Yeah, it's gonna see. Let's see. Waiting for more people to hop on.
Okay. Yeah, a few minutes to.
Yeah. So I've been meaning to tell you. Tomorrow kicks off my yoga teacher training.
Yay! That's exciting. Where are you doing?
I'm actually doing it. So a friend of a friend, her sister owns a studio in Williamsburg. It's called Studio South. And she had just finished up a group training, but not for some reason, I know the reason. I felt called to do it one-on-one privately, actually. So she was willing and able to train me privately. And so, yeah, it's just going to be, awesome. I'm excited. I'm really excited.
Yeah, so. That's really great.
Yeah,
that's exciting. So I have to keep in touch about that too and do some yoga-y kind of based stuff.
Yeah, love it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I think.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Is my
yeah, I can hear you. I think more people will just kind of trickle in as we get started. And so I know that kind of when we spoke briefly beforehand that I want to just kick it off, and I want people to kind of hear more about what you do and what you specialize in and kind of how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so I am a therapist by training, and I'm licensed as a therapist. I'm also a health coach, which I did the Institute for Integrative Nutrition health coach training program I completed it in 2012. And since that time, I've started integrating this more holistic approach to, in general, I wanted to bring more opportunities to the people that I serve. And initially, I was anticipating I would do just some health coaching on the side and continue doing counseling, sort of more straightforward. And I continuously had people reaching out, like, can you help me with food? Can you help me with my relationship with food and emotional eating? And it just became this theme. And it really feels like that's what, that's really a place of need, that so many people are struggling with emotional eating. And it's sort of not necessarily an eating disorder full blown, but it feels like it has either maybe it's an indicator that that could be potentially going to happen, or it's just in that kind of gray area where it goes undetected. Yeah. And so doctors aren't asking the right questions to see what might be going on. And these are women who often feel like they have tried every diet out there. They've tried all these different lifestyle things. And they're like, but I still find myself at the end of the day, like in the bathroom with a bag of cookies and wondering like, what is going on. Yeah. So that's sort of, and that's how it sort of evolved and where I am now. That's my primary focus. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know that there are so many people out there that share that story. And unfortunately, I think there is kind of some shame around it, right? And so through this webinar and through our conversation and through my message and your message, like I want people to understand that there should be no shame around it. Absolutely. And also when you can understand what is going on, both from like a mental, emotional, as well as a physiological perspective, like that will help to kind of like shed some more light and help people feel more empowered in the face of it. Because I think that is a big problem. Like it's like a feeling of powerlessness. Yes. So I would love for you to kind of, because the term emotional eating, right? Like it could encompass a variety of situation scenarios. Like, could you just kind of provide a good explanation or definition for like what that even means?
Sure. So emotional eating is when there's a drive to eat that is emotionally based. And often that goes unconsciously. Like people might recognize as stress eat, or, just like I have all of these thoughts about food or these intense cravings. But it's really about suppressing the emotional world. And for many people, and for humans in general, we like pleasure, we seek pleasure. And so when anytime there's this uncomfortable emotion, then there's this shift to what else should I do? What else can I do? And that all might be happening on an unconscious basis. And that's when the thoughts might arise about food and it distracts from whatever that underlying emotion may be. Yes. And then the stress part of that is, at the end of the day of feeling like, you didn't have a second to yourself all day long. You were dealing with everybody else's problems, potentially, whether it's your family or your work or other things you had to do, and not having any time to yourself. And then this happens week after week, and then feeling the sense of deprivation. So those emotions all get stuffed, and then it's like just want to make yourself feel better. And it provides that instant release. Right. And from the physiological standpoint, like you talked about, the brain responds very quickly to sugar, right? It's like it hits the pleasure center in the brain pretty instantly. Right. And so it creates that sense of lightness that we might be seeking when you're feeling the heaviness of life or of a stressful day. And so it automatically can create this lightness.
Right. Right. And I want to kind of, before talking a little bit more about the physiological piece, I want to kind of talk about the emotional numbing piece of it, because I think that is huge. And I want people to understand that when it comes to working through negative emotions, right? Like at the end of the day, food can't help you do that, because from what I've seen in myself and in my clients and, on a whole, it's that when you try and, when you eat in the face of a negative emotion, like boredom, sadness, loneliness, anger, then on the other side of that, like, there might be that 5-second instant gratification due to the dopamine, signals in your brain or what have you that offer you that immediate gratification. But if you were to kind of, what I say, play the whole tape, right, on the other end of that is just another negative emotion, right? So it just gets replaced by guilt, shame, anger, and that relief, if you will, is not quote unquote real, and it's also super ephemeral and lasts for about 5 seconds.
Exactly. Yes. And because often we're not given a great language for how to express emotions or how to, who learned growing up an appropriate way of dealing with their anger? Like that's generally not something that we're sort of taught, right? And so Yeah, so the anger, and the way that I like to look at it, I actually just recently wrote a blog post about the 5 stages of awareness to help uncover and become more comfortable with going through those emotional layers.
Yes.
Because it's really, it feels scary in the moment. And if emotional eating has been pervasive and happening for a long time, then it's sort of like dipping your toe in and moving slowly through the process of getting more comfortable with emotions, feeling the emotions, and becoming aware of them.
Right.
And the first part of it is mindfulness. It's just recognizing, and mindfulness is kind of a buzzword these days, but the definition is of mindfulness is paying attention from moment to moment with a non-judgmental awareness.
I
And
love that.
judging, then it's not a good emotion or a bad emotion. It's just an emotion. And so then we take the, is this good or bad out of it, and we can just kind of witness the emotion. Then first becoming mindful that I can just connect with the present moment. And that's just the question, what is true right now? What am I experiencing? And then as you go through those layers, as you recognize, well, I'm angry. And anger is a great indicator, because then you decipher why is this emotion here, and what do I need to learn from it? And anger is a great indicator that I'm not okay with how I'm being treated, or I'm not okay with what's occurring in my life right now, some situation. And so then you have an opportunity to make a choice of how do I want to respond to this emotion. And that's the huge valuable piece right there, is choosing to respond instead of stuffing it or feeling like anger's bad, or if I get angry, then I might, and all this again could be happening on an unconscious level, but if I get angry, I might like throw something or say something hurtful, and it can take it to another level that feels just unacceptable within. And so then we suppress it and eat it, and then it continues onward, which then turns to often self-loathing, the guilt.
Yeah. And I love that, the art of non-judgment and applying that here. And, wouldn't you agree with the fact that a lot of the times how people were raised, and that can kind of stem from childhood, and the fact that we were basically taught, whether by our parents or by our society, to kind of push negative emotions to the side, right? Like, stop crying, like, don't be a sissy, or like, what do you have to be sad about? Or like all of these different messages that we got, that to feel a negative emotion is wrong.
Yes.
Right. And I want to right now completely debunk that story and just say, like, we're humans. Like, negative emotions are part of the human experience, just as positive emotions are. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. And so just like I like to tell people to use the art of non-judgment with food, right? Like, that is why, how we eat so often parallels with kind of those other emotional imbalances, or whatever we're experiencing in those other aspects of life, can kind of be this like microcosm, right? For like your emotional life as well. So when you can kind of like use the art of non-judgment with food, because people are like, oh, I'm being good, or I'm being bad. And then what do you think that does to your emotional state, right? Because
then you internalize that, right? And that means I am bad if I've eaten a bad food, or if this is a bad feeling, therefore I'm bad. And then that perpetuates.
Exactly. And, then you feel guilt and shame. And like, wouldn't you agree that guilt and shame are super powerful emotions,
Very powerful. Guilt is very useful if you have actually done something wrong, right? It's our conscience, essentially. And if you haven't done anything wrong, guilt is not valuable in that moment. It's not needed. And so that's really the last layer of becoming aware of emotion, is why am I experiencing this emotion? What information can I glean from this emotion? And if it's not serving me in any way or not useful right now, then how can I let it go? And that's where, again, we have the power. Or how can I express it, or in some way reframe it, and that creates something that is real? Because if there's nothing to be guilty about, you haven't done anything wrong, you are not bad, then by eating this one thing or whatever it is that you feel guilty about, then that releases that, and often then can stop the cycle when it becomes that emotional cycle that ends in the guilt. Then you have to eat the guilt to get back to, it's that constant cycle.
Yeah. And the fact that, like, the way that our brain chemistries work too, is that your brain basically creates these like little shortcuts, right? So it like remembers that was a very effective behavior in the short term. And so even though like you engaged in the behavior and afterwards you felt a negative emotion, what the brain remembers though was that like instant, reward hormone signals going on. And so that can be really strong, right? And hard to break. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love what you said kind of, and what I like to tell people, like, just as, let's say in the physical realm, okay, like you are experiencing like digestive distress, and you can use that as information that maybe you ate something that didn't serve you, right? But if you feel a negative emotion, I like to tell people that that can be used as information for something that might not be serving you, in terms of like, what thought are you thinking, or what's the belief that's going on, right? So then it's a matter of, okay, it's not about the food, it's not about the behavior, it's not even about the actions that you're taking, it's more about the thoughts and the beliefs that are the root cause of that negative emotion.
Exactly.
So could you kind of talk to how you help someone unpack those beliefs or those thoughts that might be driving the behavior in the first place?
Exactly. So with the thought, it could be, that's something that might be happening on the conscious level, where I think that I would like to change this behavior. I think I want to have more control over my food choices or whatever. But the belief is in more in the unconscious or subconscious space, where if you have this pattern going on where you're in a negative feedback loop that'll never change, or why bother, or I've tried other things before, nothing's ever worked, then the action never happens. There's no action that you take from a direct thought. Really, thoughts about yourself, when you find that you're catching those kind of in there, the beliefs that are thoughts around, or kind of those subconscious thoughts, then how can you then explore those? So the ones that are like, why bother, or the kind of being mean to yourself, like, I'll never change, so what's the point, or I'm bad because I've eaten this food. And so all of those negative thoughts, then you can start to take a hold of those and really look at what is true with them, and ask yourself, is this a true thought? And if your mind really wrestles with you about that, then I just think, what is it, a useful thought? Is this useful for you to be having this why bother thought right now? Is it moving you forward towards your goal? Is it helping propel you towards the life that you really want to be living? And if no, then it's not useful. And therefore we either need to cancel it, delete it, visualize a stop sign, in some way get in there and start to kind of mitigate that. So stopping the mind from going down that road, so the negative feedback loop, every time you give it a little opportunity in the brain to kind of go towards a different neural pathway, and start again like a groove. You say, stop, no, this is not a useful thought. And it's not even about positive thinking at this point. It's just, is this real? And if it's not, then you can take it out, and then you start creating and deepening that groove every time you practice it. Then eventually you have that as a new resource internally, whether it's the cancel, or visualizing like a delete button, or the stop sign, or in some way getting yourself out of that loop of I'm not good enough, I've done something bad, my choices, I'll never change. I think that's the fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to come back to that, because I know that we kind of talked about this briefly with just us, but the whole being tied to your story, and even those beliefs that might be instilled in childhood. But I want to come back to that questioning its truth, because that was a game changer for me, and especially reading Byron Katie, and just learning to, because what I want people to understand too is that these negative emotions and these negative thoughts won't completely go away, right? Like, as humans, we're hardwired to perceive the negative.
Right.
But when you're able to take a step back, and that's where the mindfulness piece comes in, and either A, look at things objectively, or B, question what story you're telling yourself that is 99.9% of the time not even true, then people can realize that they're kind of like keeping themselves in this very anxious, negative space. Like, they're trapped. I mean, their thoughts alone are trapping them in there when it's not even true in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the awareness is the very first step. And as soon as you're aware of these thought patterns, because again, they often happen, like, they're just always there. There's kind of this noise in the background. But if you start to bring that more into your conscious mind and your awareness, you can make a choice about how to respond to those thoughts. And, none of us are our thoughts. We can have all different kinds of thoughts, but that doesn't define us. And so really being able to recognize what thoughts are not useful and how can I start to shift away from having those thoughts or believing those thoughts, and then what new things do I want to believe about myself? What is my goal? What is my vision? And start creating a desire for something different, but then also believing in the possibility that that will happen with effort, with practice, with consistency.
Ooh, the power of belief.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that one.
Yep.
But, you know, with all of these amazing things being said, what are some like action steps that you have people undergo? Because to change your thoughts and to learn to speak positively to yourself and all that stuff, like that is amazing. And, you know, but like, is there something that you have your clients do, or like meditation, journal, something like that, that can sort of get them on a better path?
All of the above. But definitely the emotion journal is really helpful so journaling helps to get it out of your head and separate it from what's happening in here, so that you can have this ability to look at it objectively. You can also contain it to an extent, right? It lets it out, dumps it out of your head, and gives it another space to rest. So then you can close the journal when you feel like you've let it all out.
Right.
And then you can go back, and if it's useful for you, it may be good just to get it out, and that may be satisfactory. For others, we go through and kind of highlight what are some of the patterns or themes, particularly around beliefs about themselves or their feelings, that seem to be kind of like guilt and shame, that don't really feel like they're congruent with their experience, but they continue to have those deep-seated feelings. And start to look at then, how do we create a new story, and how do you start to go through different tools. And so one of the most simple ones that we do is you start with, what is the thought that seems to be this pervasive, continuous thought pattern, and then questioning it, asking kind of how's this impacting my body to have this emotion? If it's something like anxiety, it's causing maybe a sensation in your chest of shortness of breath. Maybe it's creating some nausea. There's that angst within the physical body, tightness in the neck and shoulders. So all of these uncomfortable elements. Are there any other emotions connected to the thought that might be creating the anxiety? It might be creating, sadness or fear or other elements of thought, of emotions. And then we look at, is this true or is this useful? And then ask, what is it doing to me to have this thought about myself, or this unfounded belief? And so it could be causing lack of sleep. It could be causing stagnancy in terms of moving forward towards goals. And then how would I feel if I did not have this thought, if I could get rid of it, or if I could, reframe it, get rid of it, whatever. And often it's, I might just have a light sense of lightness. My body would feel more comfortable. I wouldn't be suffering from these layers of emotion. So it's really getting in there and digging through, what is this doing to you to have this continuous negative thought pattern or these beliefs about yourself that you've already identified they're not true and they're not useful.
Right. And
then we look at how to start to reframe and that's just not looking at, again, necessarily positive thinking, but really looking at what is true. And so if it's a fear that I'll never change, well, although in the past I've struggled, that does not mean I'm not capable of change. So it's making it a true statement that makes it real right now, because we can't predict the future, and anxiety always wants to jump ahead and catastrophize that the future will be terrible. So why bother, type of thing. And so anxiety will create all of these other problems and disasters. And yet right now there's no need to focus on any of that because there is no disaster. What can you do? And then we look at action steps beyond that. So once you've worked through some of the negative thoughts and created a release of the emotion, so with journaling and doing some of this kind of more practical self-work, then adding in, my really firm believer in just a mindful minute, at least once a day, of having 1 minute, up to 5, and then we build slowly from there, of just being. So that's watching the breath, just trying to practice coming away from the thinking mind and into the present moment. And it's really hard. Everybody tells me I can't meditate, it's too hard. I know, because I've been there where I've got and I'm, tend towards anxiety, back to the monkey mind too. So my mind going all over the place. Some days it's easier than others. And it's just knowing that it's the practice that is what matters. And most everybody, the more that they start getting into this as a practice find it to be extremely valuable, and just to offer that space of decompression.
Yeah.
So that's another really valuable piece of it in terms of getting into what is going on internally and how do I start to shift and change.
Right.
And have a plan. So what do I want? So really looking at what do I want,
Mm-hmm.
so that there's the belief and the possibility that that can be, and that can be achieved. And then looking at sort of action steps to get there. So if your goal is to have, let's say, more leafy green vegetables, then it's having a plan for how am I going to put that into action in my life. I'm going to make a list, and I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to prep the greens so they're ready to go. And I'm going to have, a salad or a soup or whatever every day. Right. Green. So it makes it really practical in terms of creating change as well, where it's like, okay, I've got this other piece going on where I'm actually doing what I set out to do because I have these really simple steps to provide an opportunity to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And, kind of like what you said about meditation, like I really want to clear up the confusion. And I think, and I've been there too. And I think a lot of the times when people, the people who most need to meditate are the ones with the busiest minds, but yet are probably what I would categorize as perfectionists. And the fact that perfection doesn't exist, recovering perfectionist over here. But also the fact that so many people think that if they can't clear their mind completely, then they're doing it wrong. Or, and it's not about that at all. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because what I tell people is your mind is going to chatter. It's going to be noisy and the thoughts are going to come in, but it's what you do with them that can enhance your practice, right? And that's why it's a practice, because it increases mindfulness and awareness, knowing that instead of just being this like passive receptacle to the hamster wheel in your mind, you can practice this questioning its truth and figuring out your stories on kind of throughout the day, basically, like knowing, like if you're driving your car and all of a sudden you don't know how you got from point A to point B because your mind has been, out in la la land with the meetings and the emails and the to-do list.
Right.
Then it's about being like, okay, actually what is real right now, right? Like, oh, I'm just here driving my car. It's the only thing that's real. And this is why I love meditation, or what, like you said, I call it a breathing space, just to practice knowing that when those thoughts come in, you have the capacity to just let them go. And then you bring your attention back to what's real. And you have to keep doing this over and over and over again, right?
Yeah. It never stops. Exactly. And so for the people who struggle with the need for perfection, I like to think of it as even someone who, let's say, has been meditating for, they're 20 years and they spend 2 hours meditating, their mind still wanders. So there's it's just, what do you do about it? And so I like to think of it as a cycle. So you start with your point of focus, and that might be your breath. That might be a word or a phrase that's calming or grounding, something like peace or let go, all is well, something really nice that feels good. And so, or it could be paying attention to just looking at an image, or it could be a candle flame. It can be anything that allows your point of focus to find a place to rest, and you have that to return to. And then there's inevitably going to be a distraction. So that might be that you have an ache in your body, and so then you're tending to the ache, which can cause you to feel irritated because I can't meditate because my back hurts or whatever. And then you recognize, okay, I have this sensation going on, or this thought, or this emotion, or there's this sound occurring. And then you notice, oh, wait, I'm caught up in my distractions. So then it's the awareness is another layer of this. And then once you become aware that you're distracted, you can let it go. And once you let it go, like the revolving door, then you start back to just focusing in on your breath, or your mantra, or your image, or whatever it is that can hold your attention as much as possible. And if your mind wanders 1,000 times, you just want to bring it back to your point of focus 1,001 times, so that you're continuing to maintain the cycle. And inevitably, for everyone that I've worked with, myself included, through this process, that let's say I normally have 100 thoughts a minute, and I go down to about 80 thoughts a minute, there's a break there. There's a noticeable break there. And even if my mind is still thinking, sometimes it's likened to like diving into a pool in the middle of the summer when there's a ton of kids splashing up above on the water. And when you're down under the water, you get a break from all that noise. You know it's still there, but you're not attending to it. And it's the same idea with being able to kind of get below the mind stuff, the chitter chatter that's always in the background, and absorbing more and more with whatever your point of focus may be. And that's the big difference between mindfulness and meditation. Mindfulness is noticing everything, but not attending to anything. And yet, when you're in a state of meditation, you're absorbing into just one point of focus. So like a laser pointer, it's just one thing. But inevitably, no matter what you're practicing, and both are valuable, no matter what you're practicing, it's just about coming back to your focus when your mind wanders, because it will. It's just part of the practice.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to kind of come back full circle to touch back on kind of like what this has to do with eating and sugar, especially because I know that that is a lot of people that are that is what a lot of people are struggling with, is the emotional eating of the sugary things in the stressed out state or in the negative emotional state. And I want to kind of shed some light on why this is even an effective tool to help kind of work through this.
Yes.
And help people understand that, you know, you have different sources of stress in your life, right? Like if you kind of think about our primal ancestors, like they hunted, gathered, they like slept under the moon and, you know, woke up with the sun. And yeah, maybe they had to like fight a saber-toothed tiger here and there. But in terms of the stress that we are exposed to on a day-to-day basis, like our bodies haven't evolved to the point to kind of discern between that fight or flight from saber-tooth tiger, right? And like toddler throwing a tantrum, or boss is really mad at you, or fight with your husband, or what have you.
Yes.
Not to mention that I always say that one of the greatest sources of stress that we might have in our lives is how we speak to ourselves, right? That inner dialogue.
Exactly.
And that you're basically, if you're speaking very negatively to yourself, and I always ask, like, if you were to say out loud to your best friend, mother, sister, would she slap you in the face the way that you speak to yourself?
Exactly.
Or, you know, would she give you a hug? And so people tend to underestimate, usually it's the former, usually people underestimate the damage that they're doing by speaking so negatively to themselves, and their body constantly feels like it's under attack.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
And our body doesn't know the difference if it's happening in our mind, or if it's actually, if we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, if we're just worried about being chased, the body responds the same. And so it goes into that sympathetic nervous system response of fight or flight. And we want to live in the rest and digest mode, where we are in a state of calm. We are in parasympathetic nervous system response. That's where we're designed to live, so that when there's a true emergency, our body has the resources to go and man it, like fight or flight, get out of that situation, or figure out how to manage that. But we're kind of in a little bit of a state of fight or flight all the time in this culture in general. Just everything's an emergency, right? It's like getting to work's an emergency, getting my coffee is an emergency. Like everything feels like this emergency, and it's not.
Right.
And as soon as so the meditation piece comes into play across the board. So it gives you a space to just be. So it lets you decompress some of that stress, have a different intent and focus maybe after the practice. But then it's not just the practice that's the value. It's how do you bring that essence into your day-to-day life? And so you give yourself space. Particularly mindful eating is a huge part of what I do, and with working with people, and how I try to be with myself as well, because how many people just get to a bottom of a bag of chips, not even necessarily emotionally eating, but it's just, oh man, how did that happen?
Right.
Mindless eating. And so, and that can be triggering as well. And so it's really being present with the food that you're eating. Not only does that allow you to gauge your hunger and full cues, so you can pay attention to and become more intuitive with what your body needs, or if it needs more food, if it is still hungry, or if it's not, if it feels satisfied. And then you have to make a choice around, well, if I'm going to continue to eat, then what's that about? And so mindful eating gives you that opportunity. It also creates that non-judgmental awareness of food, So instead of, oh, this is a good food or bad food, this is just food. And if I'm going to choose to eat whatever this is right now, I'm not going to judge it.
Right.
And I want to make sure I'm not in, let's say it's something that we might normally gauge as like a bad food, like a cookie or something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want the cookie, there's no reason you shouldn't have this cookie in this moment. And it's a whole different thing than a plate of cookies. And so if you decide, I really want to eat this cookie, I am hungry, like you gauge all those things, and it is not an emotionally driven decision. I am not eating this cookie because I'm stressed, angry, sad, lonely, bored,
right,
all of these other things, then eat the cookie, and it's just being non-judgmental about it and enjoy it, because food should be pleasurable, and taking the pleasure away from eating is just a horrible thing. So it's sad. And so whether it's mindless and we eat and we get to the bottom of the bag of chips that could have been enjoyable, but instead just eat a few of them, but instead now I've eaten them all and didn't even pay attention to what they tasted like, because it was just sort of this rote numbing or this rote mindlessness of trying to do something else at the same time.
Right.
And so that's where meditation, mindfulness come in, because it's not just the practice itself, which is incredibly valuable, but then it's how do you carry that essence into the rest of your day?
Exactly. And, I don't think that people completely understand that like digestion actually starts in the mind. So, the cephalic phase of digestion. So this works both ways, right? Like if you've ever been watching TV and you see a commercial for a delicious something, and then all of a sudden your mouth starts watering and then you're hungry. On the other end of the spectrum, there's the lack of mindfulness, and that, like you said, you get to the bottom of the bag and you're like, how did this happen? Because if your mind's not mentally present, then your body doesn't necessarily get the memo that it has just eaten. But also kind of what I love to have people do is like, I think the art of non-judgment in the eating experience is huge, but I even like to have people take it a step further. And this kind of like comes in, especially when you can shift to a more whole real foods way of eating. Absolutely. And knowing that like when you eat real food, right, there's kind of that like beautiful collage of color on your plate. And that eating is one of the most present-based pleasurable experiences that we have, given it is such a sensory experience. Exactly. So you're using basically all the senses. You have touch, taste, sight with like all the colors and everything like that. So if you can sort of even take it from thinking about food on the realm of the negative, like the anxiety, go through to neutral to non-judgment, but then shift to seeing it as beautiful, like talk about improving your relationship with food, right? And you're not going to get that experience from a sleeve of Oreos.
Exactly.
Because it's like black and white.
Yeah. So if you can look at your food and say, what do you have to offer me? That's a really great question. And that takes the deprivation mindset of like, oh, I can't have that. It's like, well, if it doesn't suit my health goal, if it doesn't have anything to offer me, then why am I going to choose to eat this food right now? Right. And again, there may be the times when you do choose that, and that's fine. And you do that with awareness, and it's not a binge, it's not overeating, it's not mindless. It is with awareness that you're taking that in. And that may happen. And that, again, there's nothing to be said for taking that away. But for the most part, we want to choose foods that are whole and healthy. That's what our body is literally hoping to get in terms of nutrients. It wants fiber, it wants vitamins and minerals. It needs to have healthy fats and carbohydrates and protein. It needs all of these nutrients. And when you're eating more whole, healthy foods and creating them, preparing them in a way that tastes delicious, then you feel satisfied naturally.
Yes. I think that's great. And I do the same thing, encourage people to like before their plate or while they're sitting down being like, how is this benefiting me? Yeah. And you're so right in the fact that there is no perfection. There is no eating clean 100% of the time. That's not what life is about either. But there is a difference between, and this is kind of what I call those like cell nourishing foods, right? Like 90% of the time you want to eat those colorful whole real foods. But then you have those soul nourishing foods in life. And there's a difference between having your favorite cake on your birthday and a delicious ice cream cone on your family vacation at the beach versus, again, like eating those processed packaged foods day in and day out. And just because of the refined sugar and carbohydrates, and the fact that if you were to sit there and taste them and savor them, it's like they probably taste like chemicals.
Right, they don't taste that good. And that's actually when I'm working with people, I've had that feedback before where a couple people are like, you've ruined Diet Coke for me.
Yeah. It's like, you're welcome.
They're like, oh my gosh, this is gross.
Yeah.
We've all been there. We've all been
Yeah.
addicted to the Diet Coke, the Cokes, whatever. And I'm not to, use a brand name and diss anybody, but it's just, we've been addicted to those sugary or chemical-y foods. And then once you take a break from it, or once you cleanse your palate, so to speak, and you're eating, like in your, like Genius Count Your Colors, Not Calories course, like then you're focused on what you're cleansing your palate. And then when you eat something that is naturally sweet, it's delicious. But if you eat something that's more chemicalized or overly sweetened, it doesn't taste good anymore, because your palate is more prepared for healthy or more simplified sugars.
Yeah. And I kind of want to speak to the whole like dieting mindset too, because I think that is where a lot of food anxiety is triggered. And, there's a reason why, I know it's even cliche to say it now, that diets don't work, but it's because they really don't work. Because when you when you approach eating and food and nutrition and your physical body from a place of deprivation, lack, scarcity, right? There's no way that, it might work for the short term, but there's no way that can be sustainable if your relationship with food is one that is still kind of characterized by all of those negative things.
Exactly. Restriction leads to two things. It leads to either malnutrition or it leads to binging. So there's no good endpoint for a diet, because at some point it's not going to be sustainable. People are either going to starve, and then that leads to other problems, or they're going to go miserable. It may temporarily result in weight loss if that's a goal, but usually it's not sustainable. And I think it's been proven in science and all kinds of places. But if you are sustaining weight loss, it's usually slower. It's making slow shifts, then integrating them one at a time, kind of like the leafy green vegetable, counting your colors, doing those things, and shifting the way that you're taking in sugars, and then being more mindful with food. So paying attention to hunger and full cues, so that you're being sure not to overeat and to really be mindful. And that might be only 1 or 2 pounds a month, but at the end of a year, that's 12 to 25 pounds potentially, which you don't have to make a whole lot of shifts to create that type of weight loss, and it becomes more sustainable throughout life. And then if you add exercise or other things to that, that might increase it a bit. But it's about, how do you enhance your life with food, not how do you create this I can't have that mindset that just creates more discomfort and anger, and just, it's not a good place to be.
Right, exactly. It's like approaching it from a place of like abundance. Like, this is what I do to take care of myself, not this is what I do in order to see a certain number on the scale. And I kind of want to, again, bring that back to the idea that a lot of people, those complete physical health needs aside, for those people that like need to lose weight in order to get to a better place, health wise. But a lot of the times, especially as women, like, we're looking for weight loss, or we're relying on achieving that number on the scale in order to achieve some positive emotion.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And a lot of the times what I found, especially in myself and what I've seen, is that even when you get to that benchmark, if you haven't done the inner work right, and kind of brought the other imbalances up, that again, that's not completely sustainable, and that's not going to guarantee happiness.
So, and just like with mindfulness in general, so if you're looking at it from, this will make me happy, happiness is not, happiness literally, the nice definition is happiness is wanting what you have. So that's already takes away this kind of, when I get to that number, then I'll be happy.
Yeah.
Will I be happy because I have this number on a scale, or am I happy because now I'm feeding my body and my brain and my, my soul, these nutrients that are really valuable and sustaining, life sustaining? Am I happy because I'm now exercising and stimulating the natural dopamine release in the brain and create? Am I happy because I have set a goal and I'm working towards something that is about living my best life, or feeling my best, or creating a sustainable way to be? And so happiness, just because happiness may be temporary from a diet because like, thank God I'm done with this diet. Now I want
Right.
a number, but that's not lasting. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to go out and celebrate. I mean, it's just, again, it creates that pendulum swing of now the deprivation's over, and I've got this number with this size or whatever. And then all of a sudden they're back over in the binge, or because it's just not, deprivation does not work. And so I think, yeah, what you're pointing to with how do you create this abundance mindset is I already have all I need, but I can make these shifts and changes that create a healthier way of being, a healthier way to feel, and essentially a healthier relationship with food, when food no longer becomes this something to wrestle with.
Yeah.
Or something that's controlling.
Exactly. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday, actually, that said something super eye-opening, which was your brain wasn't built to make you happy. It was basically its number one role is to keep you alive, right? And so that is why feeling happy is basically a choice.
Yeah.
Because our brain keeps us alive by keeping us scared and keeping us negative and keeping us fearful, because as soon as right, it's got to be alert, because as soon as we get to like a peaceful place, then boom, like saber-tooth tiger comes out and eats you, right? But what people need to realize is that that's not our reality anymore. And so we don't need to keep walking around as these scared, fearful, anxious people. We can, and this isn't like pulling the Pollyanna card either, but it's about knowing that you have a complete choice in your thoughts. It's not always going to be easy, but in order to make that shift, it's going to take work, especially at the beginning, until it becomes more naturally ingrained. And like, to your point, that's why mindfulness is so important, and how meditation can really help to just practice doing that.
Yeah. Practicing the art of being a human being. It's just being, and we're not doings and accomplishing, we're human beings. And so just offering that space frees you from all of the chains of the past, because you're not involving yourself with thinking about the past. You're not overly anxious about the future because you're just paying attention to what is true right now. And when you give yourself that opportunity to engage in the present moment, that lightens you up automatically, and it feels much more comfortable.
Yes. And, you know, to elaborate on like keeping you alive, and like this is basically what we're trying to say, and kind of talking about the anxiety and the stress and all of that jazz. Like, you're in the face of a fight or flight response, like you're gonna crave glucose, right? Like sugar. And that's kind of where the nutritional science and the physiological aspect comes into play. Knowing that when people feel as if they have like uncontrollable sugar cravings, it's because, I mean, what are these foods broken down to in your system? Glucose, sugar in its simplest form. And in the face of a fight or flight response, like your body is either going to need that quick fuel to either fight or flee. And then if you kind of bring in the thoughts, the beliefs of like, my sugar cravings are uncontrollable, then how you're speaking to yourself is basically signaling to your physical body, okay, you're not in control here. So then you're basically going to like create this experience where you're craving sugar, you don't feel in control, you're giving the food power, boom. It's kind of like this perfect storm.
Yeah. It is. And then the food industry is just loving that, because
they know what they're doing. You know, back when like our primal ancestors had to fight or flee a saber-tooth tiger, like if they needed quick fuel, it was like a handful of berries. Now it's like a handful of Girl Scout cookies. So you have to kind of realize what is in abundance around you and how unnatural that is. Okay, well, I think that kind of covers everything that I wanted to talk about.
This is great.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff to talk about.
I know. And I would say we could open it up to Q&A, but we, and I don't know, I would really like to do that little breathing space that you said that you wanted to do. I will throw it out there though. We have some time. So if anyone does have a question, I will open up the floor. All you have to do is just raise your hand, and I'll give it a few seconds. Okay, people are being shy.
Okay. I know you sent me a couple of questions, and I don't know if we touched on those already.
Oh, yeah.
One of them was just about like, how do you make a happy time or celebration that you used to have food? Like food used to be the way that you celebrated. And so just to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, please.
With having another option for how to celebrate is really valuable. And so one of the tools that I give many of the women that I work with is a positive nourishment list. So it's coming up with a list of 10 to 15 things to do that nourish you positively, but are not food-based. And so it could be like calling your best friend, or, you know, it could have something that they pay money for, like going to get a massage, or something that in some way makes you feel really good. And when you have the list, it's much easier to access that whenever you've already created it, you've thought about it ahead of time, than when you're kind of like, okay, what should I do? I don't know what to do now that I'm having this craving, but I know I don't want that. And yet and you're still in that kind of limbo space. So that offers the opportunity. And again, I've kind of talked about how you want to feel lighter. And so it's also what kinds of things naturally lighten you up that are not food-based. And that's a really valuable thing to offer yourself, is what creates lightness. It's what might become a new breathing practice, journaling, that kind of lightens up the emotional side of things so that you're not feeling weighed down by all of that.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think, and this is where kind of like that holistic circle of life comes into play, right? When the fact that like, if we are over reliant on food to bring pleasure into our life, right? Like, it's like when I hated my desk job and I would sit there like counting down the minutes to like my mid-morning and mid-afternoon snack, because that was the most pleasurable part of my day. Right. So it's getting really up close with the fact that like, okay, where can you create pleasure and joy in other areas of life in order to not be so reliant on the food? Exactly. So it has you kind of take a look at like, okay, where's the void and where can I like add in that joy?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I know one of the other questions that you had said, it was something about just the feeling of deprivation. If other people having, let's say you're at a birthday party and everyone's having the ice cream cake, and you either are choosing not to eat it because you know it doesn't serve your health goal, or it's not, you don't feel good when you eat that. Right. My personal mantra is, because I've had IBS and SIBO and, you know, all kinds of skin problems and other stuff in the past that were all based on my poor diet in the past, and a host of other things. But I know my personal mantra is just, this food is not worth a stomach ache. This food is not worth having my skin break out. This food is not worth not being able to wake up tomorrow morning because I'm going to be in that kind of like yucky feeling food coma. And so just really knowing that, and then not coming from that sense of I can't have it, but I really don't want it anymore. I don't want it. And people have a very hard time with this, because food equals love to a lot of folks, and particularly in those situations where it's celebratory, that it feels like, well, you're not celebrating with us, or you are like a party pooper or whatever. And so it's really having to also become very confident in your decisions and your choices, and believing that you're choosing this, and it's not because that external noise might make you feel that deprivation space again. But it's really trying to own from the inside out the choice that this is not okay for my body. I don't want to feel bad. Therefore, I choose not to eat it. Yeah. And I think that definitely goes along with like that ultimate shift, right? The one from deprivation to abundance. Like, it's not that like you can't have it. It's just that you don't have it because it doesn't serve you or whatnot. And you're actually doing your body a favor. Yeah. So again, that like all it takes is just, it's the language. It's the one word from I can't to I don't, or I choose not to, right? Your power of language is so powerful. And also, I was going to say something else about that. And it has escaped me, but okay. Maybe it'll come back. Yeah. Oh, okay. This is what I was going to say. And if anyone gives you, you know,
if you choose not to have something in a group setting and you get backlash from that, from like family, friends, what have you, and that makes you feel awkward, that has everything to do with them, right? Like what we put into our bodies in terms of what we eat is a very intimate thing and shouldn't be, I don't know, we shouldn't get slack for it. And if they do, then maybe that has everything to do with how they're perceiving it, or their own insecurities with food, or their need to control, or I don't know, give their 2 cents. So like you said, it's about having confidence in you and your choices, and, you know, to just kind of brush off any awkwardness there.
Yes, absolutely. And that just, again, creates an opportunity to feel more grounded, to feel more empowered. I think it's really about empowering yourself to make the choices that are going to serve you and your body. Yeah.
I love that. Well, I wanted to take a little bit of time, and I know I want you to tell everyone about kind of like what you're offering in the next couple of months. But my course coming up in October, Count Colors, Not Calories, basically embodies all of this and kind of takes through that process of looking at nutrition, yes, but then mindful eating, intuitive eating, intuition, and then like kind of what we just said, if you're over reliant on food to bring pleasure and joy, we explore kind of finding alignment and flow and how you can bring joy and presence into your daily life in non-food related areas. So if, you know, you're here listening being like, I don't even know how to get started on these shifts, then, well, we've got you covered. But tell people about your program that you're offering at the end of October.
Yeah, so at the end of October, it's called a Freedom from Emotional Eating, and it's six modules. It's stretched over 7 weeks, but it's designed, I've done it in small group format before, but it's designed to help support people who struggle during the holiday season. So we started right the week of October 31st. So it's, I believe I'm starting on the 27th, but, and it's designed to go through about mid-December to help support not getting caught up from the Halloween candy to the, you know, everything else that just starts to show up at work, or, you know, neighbors bringing by cookies, and so how to really approach the holiday season with the healthiest mindset. And it goes through, so each module, there's a intent that I do a recording, so it's just things to talk about, to think about, and then there's a worksheet type of, or like a action step involved with that. And it's a really, really nice way of having a supportive community as well, because it's all, we do like webinars and things to keep everybody connected throughout the program.
I love that. And you have a book too.
Yeah, and I have a book. So my book is titled Holistic Food Therapy with a WH, so not holistic H but the WH. And it's a mindful approach to making peace with food. It's a workbook and expressive journal that just helps to walk through the process of moving from finding your vision, believing in the possibility that change can happen, and then taking the action steps to move you through that with mindful eating, shifting mindset, with getting in the nutritional awareness that is there of how do you get into making sure you're nourishing your body, looking at sugar and all that stuff, movement, it's all in there. And it's sort of a step-by-step guide. And then in January, I'll be doing a course that follows that book as well. That'll be online. So
awesome.
2 different offerings. Yeah, and my website is holisticfoodtherapy.com with the WH, holistic. And so all the information's on the website.
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, if you could just kind of close us out with your little guided meditation, that would be great.
Yeah, so if anyone right now is thinking, okay, well, I'll just go get something else done or check my or whatever, but try to just hang in there with us and stick it out, because this is a really valuable part of the process. And so if you can even get a little something of relaxation or just a little glimpse of mindfulness, would be useful. Yeah. So if it's helpful, you can close your eyes or you can just soften your gaze. So there's no need to close your eyes if you're not comfortable with that. And then just begin by letting your body relax as much as possible. You're inviting the space between your eyebrows to soften, unhinge the jaw. Relax the space where the neck moves into your shoulders and out towards your shoulder joints. As you begin to lengthen through crown of head, extending the spine, begin to soften the muscles through the side body, hips, knees, and ankles. As you begin to tune into the rhythm of your breath, just becoming aware of the sensation of your breath against the nostrils as you inhale and as you exhale. The breath is cooling and calming as you inhale, warm and soothing as you exhale. Just beginning to direct your breath down into your abdomen so you feel your abdomen expand as you inhale. And resting navel in towards spine as you exhale. Dig into a diaphragmatic breath. Slow it down. Just noticing here as you're breathing deeply and completely. Mindful awareness of all that's around you, the sounds, any sensations within the physical body, the emotions that may be flowing through you. Notice any thoughts. Just building awareness. There's nothing you need to do about any of those things. You can even label them for what they are. Thought, a thought. An emotion, emotion. Sound is just a sound. Sensation, just a sensation. If your mind tries to pull you into the stories behind any of those potential distractions, just release them, let it go. Knowing the breath is always available to return to. Just checking back in with the physical body. Any tensions tried to come back in, let it go. And then whenever you feel ready, you can open your eyes if you close them.
That was lovely.
Just a little simple 1 to 5 minutes can make a big difference. Yeah.
Such a big difference.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Sarah, thank you.
Thank you.
Such a great conversation. And I will be sending the recording out tomorrow. And so I want you to say again where people can find you. I am at sarahmclaughlin.com. Counting Colors is at countingcolors.com, offering everybody 10% off with promo code webinar10. And then again, just say where everyone can find you. And
yes, I'm at holisticfoodtherapy.com, and that's WH for the holistic. And so you can catch me there. There's a place to fill out a form, and I send you a 3-step cravings protocol to help manage emotional cravings. So there's things on there as well in my newsletter if you're interested in signing up for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we'll have to do this again.
Yes, this was fabulous. I really appreciate your putting the attention on this really important subject.
Of course. Well, you have a good rest of your night. And everyone else, thank you so much for listening. And see you on the interwebs. All right. Good night.
Yeah, good night.
Bye.
Bye.